right, so I have done three, I think, videos about Christians voting Democrat. Okay. My position is Christians ought not be voting Democrat. And I'm trying to substantiate that position through these, get that opinion out. Okay. So this is, the election's almost here. You know, I don't expect to affect anybody's mind anyway, but I do want to just try to get this last point out because I've dealt with the things that, I think are the strongest for my case, and I wanted to deal with what I feel like is the strongest for the left leaning Christian point of view. And that is the idea of the Democrat Party being the party of helping the poor. And so, attached with that is this idea of what is the best political system because um, socialism is what the Democrats are pushing. That's not, um, there's nothing controversial there, right? And I could see a Christian making a fair case that socialism is the more Christian way of governing, you know. So, and I'm gonna, I guess, start by steel manning that position a little bit, and I think because I think it's fair to do that, um, so that anybody who may have watched the other videos knows that I'm at least attempting to understand that side of the spectrum, that perspective, right? Um, so let's deal with the Bible. Um, the, the left leaning Christian has a fair point. If they want to look at the Bible and find socialism, you can do it. It is easy to do. Um, the New Testament church was socialist. It was. I mean, the way they came together and shared their goods and what they owned. They basically came and became a community that brought everything and everybody was equal. I mean, it absolutely. I mean, this is socialism, even you could say communism 101. So, you know, Karl Marx from each according to his, uh, I forget how that even goes, to from his wealth to his need, um, that thing. So, uh, you can see that is the philosophy that is there. So, what would be my stance as somebody who, so that's basically the end of the steel manning, is that you definitely find it there. There's just no question about it. And so, how do I get out of that as a Christian who believes more libertarian conservative? Um, so here's how I understand that. The Christians came together on their own accord and decided for themselves in their group of like minds to share their wealth for a common cause. Okay? That is not the same as a government doing it on your behalf. Okay? You can argue that we vote this in, but majority rules does not save you from this point, because if you're the minority in that situation and the majority chooses socialism and communism, you didn't choose that. You didn't choose that. Whereas if you join a church and you come together and pool your resources, then that's what you've chosen to do. So the freedom aspect is still there. That's what gets removed in a socialist government scenario. So that's the stance I would take on that. Um, some may say Jesus was socialist. They may, they. I'm trying to think how they might say this. Honestly, this is a little harder for me to steel man, other than the fact that there are parables where when Jesus says the workers sent out to the field, some were in the morning in the afternoon and in the evening, and yet they were all paid the same. One could argue that. But Jesus clearly said things that go against that. For one, his actions are such that he fed the poor without government assistance. Okay? He never petitioned Caesar in any way. And so if you're a left-leaning Christian, the problem you have is that you're pro-government. And you can't use Jesus because it was the government that killed Jesus. So I don't, I can't quite get that to come together. We do have this idea of Jesus being this, a lot of times he's presented as this hippie-ish Lamb of God guy only. You know, this sort of is a bit of a pet peeve of mine, or touches on it, because I think that Christians are a little too, the way that we look at the New Testament is a lot different than the way we look at the Old Testament. I think we tend to look at the Old Testament more negatively than and God as presented in the Old Testament. We tend to not see all the mercy and grace in the Old Testament, and we tend not to see God's judgment in the New Testament. And remember that the God of the Old Testament is the same God in the New Testament. And so this hippie version of Jesus is very inaccurate. And so, if we try to think about it in these modern terms, it just does not fit very well. And so that being said, let's talk just general politics. So, the policy that we have today of a social safety net, okay? I'm for a social safety net, by the way. I just think it ought to be smart. It's too, right now it is a crutch. Paul said that if you don't work, you should not eat. The problem with the social safety net is there's no skin in the game for a lot of people. They are born and they die in government assistance. And that should never be the case. So right off the bat, the system's broke. So it's not a scenario to say, I don't think it's good to say that I think that even left-wing Christians think that's positive. But in like manner, I don't think it's fair that left-wing Christians would look at conservative Christians like me and say that we want poor people to starve and this sort of thing. So I think that there's a balanced way to approach this. From a Christian perspective, and we could talk about, I'm not going to get into what's the best way to implement policy, but just philosophically, from a Christian perspective, this concept of charity being brought about through the government, I've sort of dealt with that already in regards to how that's not really biblical. But even philosophically speaking, from an individual's standpoint for what it means to walk as a Christian, I think it's problematic, because you voting is not charity. That's not, you get no credit. In my opinion, I don't want to speak on God's behalf, but I can't imagine God giving you credit for being charitable because you chose to vote for somebody who said that they cared more about poor people. Okay? Now, it's a fair point to say that if you know poor people will be abused, that could go against you if you vote for somebody who's against it. So I can sort of understand that point. The problem is that when you do charity, you're supposed to do charity yourself. And the way that taxes work is if you don't pay them, they put you in jail. You know, right now in our society, we have the left who thinks that they want to get rid of cops. But yet they also want people to pay taxes so that they can support infrastructure and feed and house and provide health care and all the things that the left wants to do for everybody and do it for free. If you're taxing people to do that, if they don't pay their taxes, you do need cops to go point guns at them. And so that bears to mind, how is it exactly that this is a Christian position? That you would vote to have guns pointed at your neighbors, to take their money, to feed poor people. This is what it said. Let's just assume that it's all going to poor people, because we know it's not, right? That's another issue. But just the way it's done. See, it does not, it is no longer charity at that point. It would be no different if you were a mob boss and you sent a goon out to point a gun at somebody to take that money, but you went and you gave that money to an orphanage, and the orphanage goes, see how much the Godfather cares. I mean, would you think that that's Christian like? It's the same thing. You're hiring the government to steal people's money, to give it. Now, I know that there's to give it to the poor. I know that there's excuses that are made. Those people are too rich. Those people got it nefariously. The problem is that even if that were true, it does not make it right for you to steal that money. And I would argue in most cases it's probably not true. It's probably not true. Um, Again, nobody wins in that scenario. Somebody is stolen from. You get no moral points for being the one who helped facilitate the theft. And the people getting helped feel as if they're owed this anyway. They're in a system that has now created a mentality for them that they're the perpetual victim. And I see no benefit to society. I don't see Christ looking at that and saying, well done, good and faithful servant, because you coveted your neighbor's property in such a way that you desired the military police state to take their money from them and give it to the poor. That's the problem, right? And you can say, well, I'm not coveting their money because I don't want their money. But, if a rich person is left wing and has this attitude, they can just give their own money. You notice how rich people that are on the left tend to still stay rich? Have you noticed this? They always want the government to force them to take their money. They could just give their money if they wanted to. And so if you're not rich and you're left wing, then okay, yeah, you're not taking that money, but you're still coveting their money. You're still looking at their money. You're still desirous of their money. You're still focused on the money. And I think when we think about how Jesus said the the love of money, when he talked about the negative of the love of money, we tend to think about this in terms of a rich person, Scrooge McDuck kind of stuff. But what about the poor person that is focused on the things that they don't have instead of the things that they do? It's a little bit harder to be as critical of them for sure, but still, you know, it still applies. You should not, and we all deal with that, right? We all want to be a little bit more successful. Everybody would say they'd want more money, right? And so I think that's the case, right? I mean, I think the left wing people, the left leaning Christians, um, I often wonder because I think statistically they say conservatives are the ones that give more money. So how is it that the left are the more charitably focused? So it seems like it's a methodology. Those on the right prefer to give themselves, and those on the left, they like to give other people's money away. And, you know, I think that pretty much substantiates. I did my best to steel man it as much as possible, but you can see why this still doesn't hold any help for me, and this is the best argument I could come up with for why somebody might be a left leaning Christian. Um, and I hate that it seems so one sided in my mind because there's so much within me that wants to just be balanced, but I also have to call things as I see them, right and wrong, good and bad, right? And I mean, I don't know how if it's always been this way. And I'm not saying the Republicans are great. I'm clearly not. I don't. I'm a Republican by default. We, as Christians, are not to be part of this world um, in that way. We're not to be affiliated. We not. Our allegiance isn't to this world, and so our allegiance can't be to the Republican Party, for sure. But again, the Democrat Party platform, it's just, it's wretched. I mean, it's just wretched. There's just nothing about it that's redeemable. And the only thing you could say is that they want to care for the poor more. And again, that falls apart too if you just think about it a little bit deeper than empty promises. So maybe there's something I'm missing. Maybe you know what that is. Um, I just don't killing babies and coveting property, booing God. I mean, I just don't see anything redeemable about the Democrat Party. So if you can help me see that, comment. If you agree, share and like the video. Peace out.